My friends, let me share with you a story that's as real as the ground beneath our feet, one that I've come across in my years dealing with the unseen battles of the Spirit. Now, before we dive in, I should note that the names I'm using here for the folks involved are just placeholders, picked at random to make the tale easier to follow. The real identities are kept hidden out of respect for their privacy and the gravity of what they endured. This isn't some made-up yarn. It's a true account from the mid-90s, set in the rugged beauty of Oregon's mountains, a place where God's creation shines bright, but where darkness can slip in uninvited. It all started back in 1995 in the town of Bend, Oregon, a spot nestled right up against the Cascade Mountains, where the air is crisp and the lakes sparkle like jewels under the sun. Picture this: the Cascade Lakes Highway winding through forests thick with ponderosa pines, their needles turning a fiery red and gold in the fall. Tourism was booming then, folks flocking to the area for hiking, fishing, and just soaking in that Pacific Northwest wilderness. Right there on Century Drive, not far from Tumalo Lake, lived the Harper family in a cozy 2-story log home. It was the kind of place that smelled of fresh-cut wood and homemade apple pie, with a big stone fireplace in the living room where they'd gather on chilly evenings. David Harper was the head of the household, a sturdy man of 44, built like a linebacker from years of hauling logs as a truck driver. He had that booming, cheerful voice that could light up a room, always bragging about how he'd take his family out for weekend adventures. His wife Susan was 41, a secretary at the local land office with short blonde hair and a smile that could melt the hardest heart. She was the glue, holding everything together, planning those family camping trips to keep the bonds strong. They had 3 kids. Jake, the oldest at 17, a lanky teenager obsessed with fishing, dreaming of becoming a tour guide someday. Emily, 14, full of energy, always snapping photos with her little camera and scribbling in her journal. And little Timmy, just 9, a bundle of energy who loved running through the woods, climbing trees, and exploring every nook and cranny of the forest like it was his own backyard kingdom. They were good, solid Catholics, active members of Street Francis de Sales Church right there in Bend. David would lend a hand fixing cars for parishioners in the parking lot. After Mass, Susan sang in the choir with that warm alto voice of hers, and the kids were involved in the youth group, learning their catechism and helping with community events. Life was steady, predictable, in the best way: work during the week, church on Sundays, and those cherished family outings that reminded them of what mattered most. But everything changed on one of those weekend getaways, a trip that started out as innocent as any other. It was a crisp fall day, the kind where the leaves crunch underfoot and the sky is a deep blue. The Harpers packed up their old Ford pickup with tents, fishing gear, coolers full of sandwiches and sodas, and headed out to Sparks Lake, about 30 miles west of Bend along that scenic highway. The drive was beautiful, winding roads flanked by volcanic peaks, the air filled with the scent of pine and earth. They spent the day hiking trails that looped around the lake, which sits at about 5,000 feet elevation, its waters reflecting the snow-capped South Sister Mountain like a mirror. Jake caught a couple of rainbow trout for dinner. Emily filled her journal with sketches and notes about the wildlife deer grazing, birds calling overhead, and Timmy splashed in the shallows, laughing as he skipped stones across the glassy surface. As evening fell, they roasted marshmallows over a campfire, sharing stories under a blanket of stars that seemed close enough to touch. David strummed a few chords on his old guitar. Susan led them in a simple prayer of thanks, and the kids dreamed aloud about future adventures. It was one of those moments that families hold on to, a snapshot of pure joy. But on the drive back home that night, as they navigated the twisting roads in the dark, their world turned upside down. About halfway back, near a sharp bend in the highway where the road drops off into a ravine, they came upon a horrific scene. A big rig truck, probably hauling lumber, just like David did, had lost control, maybe on a patch of black ice or from driver fatigue, and flipped over the guardrail. The cab was crumpled like a tin can, and flames were licking up from the engine, casting an eerie orange glow against the night. Smoke billowed thick and acrid, the kind that stings your eyes and chokes your throat. David slammed on the brakes, his truck skidding to a halt just feet from the wreckage. "Stay in the car," he barked at the family. But they all piled out anyway, hearts pounding. The driver was trapped inside the cab, pinned by the steering wheel, blood streaking his face. He was moaning, barely conscious, as the fire spread. David, with his logger's strength, grabbed a crowbar from his toolbox and pried at the door, while Susan called for help on their clunky car. Phone cell service was spotty back then, but she got through to emergency dispatch. Jake and Emily helped by shining flashlights, and little Timmy, wide-eyed but brave, held onto his mom's hand. Together, they managed to wrench the door open just as the flames roared higher. David reached in, cutting the seatbelt with his pocket knife, and pulled the man out, dragging him to safety on the gravel shoulder. The guy was in bad shape, burns on his arms and legs, a gash across his forehead, but he was alive. As they waited for the ambulance, sirens wailing in the distance, the man grabbed Timmy's hand with surprising force. His eyes were glassy, clouded over like fog on a window, and he whispered in a raspy voice, "Thank you, but my shadow will follow you all." Timmy recoiled, but the man held on, his grip like iron. Then he slumped back, unconscious. Paramedics arrived minutes later, loading him onto a stretcher and rushing him to St. Charles Hospital in Bend, about 20 miles away. The Harpers gave statements to the state troopers, shaken but relieved they'd saved a life. They didn't know it then, but that act of mercy had opened a door to something far darker. The man died later that night in the ICU, his injuries too severe. Doctors said it was internal bleeding and smoke inhalation that did him in. But in those final moments, as nurses noted, his eyes had that same milky haze, and he muttered incoherently about shadows from the fire. The Harpers tried to shake it off. David joked about it over breakfast the next morning. Susan hugged the kids a little tighter, but Timmy couldn't forget that grasp, that whisper. It lingered like a chill in the air, even as the family returned to their routine. Little did they know, that whisper wasn't just the ramblings of a dying man. It was a transfer, a passing of something unholy from one soul to another. In my experience as an exorcist, I've seen how evil can latch on in moments like these, when good intentions collide with hidden darkness. The Bible warns us in Ephesians 6:12 that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers of this dark world and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. The Harpers had stepped into that battle without realizing it, and the weeks that followed would test their faith like never before. As the fall leaves fell and winter approached, subtle changes began to creep in. Timmy, once the life of the party, grew quiet, staring off into space for long stretches. He'd draw pictures, crude sketches with crayons of a burning man with hollow eyes, flames twisting around him like serpents. Susan, with a mother's intuition, sharp as a knife, chalked it up to shock from the accident. She took him to Dr. Laura Bennett, a kind pediatrician at St. Charles, a middle-aged woman with a reassuring bedside manner. Tests came back clean, no physical issues, just what she called post-traumatic stress disorder. "Give it time," she said, prescribing some mild sedatives and counseling sessions. But time didn't heal. Nights grew restless. The family would wake to odd sounds, giggling that wasn't childlike, more like a grown man's mocking chuckle echoing through the halls. And with it came the smell of smoke, not from the fireplace, but acrid and bitter, like something smoldering in the walls. David, ever the practical man, dismissed it as aftermath from the crash, maybe lingering odors on their clothes. He installed a couple of security cameras around the house, basic models back then, grainy, black and white, and even called in a child psychologist from Portland, about 100 miles north. But nothing showed up on tape, no explanations. Jake and Emily noticed it too. Timmy would mutter under his breath things like, "I follow you from the fire," his voice deeper than a boy's should be. Whispers spread in the community, folks at church murmuring about a curse from the wreck. Susan, desperate, turned to Father Patrick O'Malley, the parish priest at St. Francis, a 58-year-old Irishman with a deep, comforting brogue and stories from his missions back in the old country. He came over for dinner one evening, thinking it was just kid stuff, a prank or imagination run wild. But during grace, Timmy seized up, his body convulsing, eyes bulging, and from his mouth came words in a guttural tone. Belial some Latin, for I am Belial. Father O'Malley froze, recognizing the signs from his seminary days and those dark tales from Ireland. Belial, that demon of deceit and lawlessness mentioned in Deuteronomy, the one who leads people astray with lies and chaos. He didn't panic. Instead, he blessed the boy in the house, then quietly contacted experts from the Archdiocese of Portland for guidance on possession. This was the turning point, my friends. What started as a family outing had unleashed a spiritual assault, one that would escalate into a full-blown war for Timmy's soul. In my own work, appointed by the Archbishop of Indianapolis back in 2005, I performed over 40 exorcisms, always emphasizing that demons are real, but God's power is greater. The Harpers were about to learn that lesson the hard way. As winter blanketed the mountains in snow, feet of it piling up, turning the landscape into a white wonderland that hid dangers beneath the possession took hold fully. Timmy, now 10, spoke in a voice not his own, claiming to be Belial, recounting how he'd jumped from the dying trucker's body to the boys in that moment of rescue. From the flames of hell I come, it'd growl, making the room grow cold despite the roaring fire. The boy would harm himself, biting his tongue till blood flowed, vomiting ash-like dust that smelled of brimstone. Small fires erupted spontaneously, the gas stove igniting on its own, curtains smoldering without a match. The family unraveled. Susan prayed endlessly, her rosary beads worn smooth from constant use, her health fading from sleepless nights. David quit his routes temporarily, turning to the bottle for solace, his once strong frame slumping under the weight. Jake, protective big brother, confronted the entity during early prayer sessions, shouting Bible verses. Emily documented it all in her journal, her photos capturing shadows that shouldn't be there. Father O'Malley, with permission from Bishop George N. Isink of the Portland Archdiocese, began the rites of exorcism in the Harper home. Assisted by local clergy, they faced fierce resistance. Furniture levitating, invisible scratches raking the priest's skin, and Belial spewing personal secrets like David's guilt over a long-ago car accident that killed his brother. This battle raged into spring, my friends, with sessions stretching months. Father James Riley from Seattle joined a calm exorcist with international experience. Witnesses Dr. Bennett, social workers saw Timmy float, crawl backward up walls, reveal hidden sins in ancient tongues. Holy water boiled, crucifixes singed, unseen forces hurling priests across rooms. Fires plagued them. Susan burned her hand on a self-igniting faucet. Yet the Harpers endured. David sobered up, kneeling in prayer. Susan sang Irish hymns to drown the whispers. The siblings tended Timmy. Court stepped in, allowing temporary custody with Grandma during intense rites. Finally, in June 1996, after over 15 sessions, climaxing at Street Francis Church, Belial howled, "I'll follow other saviors," before fleeing in a whirlwind of smoke and wind. Peace returned. The family moved to Salem, 50 miles away, rebuilding. Timmy became a guide, Jake married, Emily a nurse, David opened a garage sober, Susan kept singing. By 2005, David, now a grandpa, shared the tale with grandkids, reminding that darkness can transfer, but God's light and family love prevail. As winter tightened its grip on those Oregon mountains, my friends, the Harper family's ordeal deepened in ways that tested the very foundations of their faith and sanity. Snow fell heavy that year, blanketing Bend in drifts that reached up to 3 feet in places, turning the Cascade Lakes Highway into a treacherous ribbon of ice and isolation. The Harpers' log home, once a haven, now felt like a besieged fortress, with winds howling through the pines outside like distant wails. Timmy's changes, which had started subtle, erupted into something undeniable, a full possession that manifested in chilling, tangible ways. By December, just as folks in town were stringing up Christmas lights and attending midnight mass at Street Francis, Timmy was no longer the boy they knew. At 10 years old, he moved with an unnatural stiffness, his eyes often rolling back to show only whites, and when he spoke, it wasn't in his high-pitched chatter, but in a gravelly baritone that echoed like it came from the bottom of a well. "I am Belial," he'd declare, citing passages from Deuteronomy where this demon is named as the Lord of worthlessness, the one who sows discord and leads souls into idolatry. In my line of work, I've encountered entities like this, deceitful spirits that twist truth into lies, feeding on fear and division. Belial, through Timmy, boasted of his ancient origins, claiming he'd hopped from the trucker's dying form into the child's during that roadside rescue, drawn by the act of compassion like a moth to flame. The manifestations grew bolder, more destructive. One night, as Susan tucked Timmy into bed, his room upstairs, with its view of Tumalo Lake now frozen over, he suddenly arched his back, levitating a foot off the mattress, sheets twisting around him like ropes. David burst in, hearing the commotion, and tried to pull him down, but an invisible force shoved him against the wall, cracking a rib. The room reeked of sulfur, not the clean pine scent of their home, but something rotten and charred. Timmy, or rather, the thing inside him, laughed, a sound that rattled the windows and spat out details only David knew. The exact words his brother had said before dying in that car crash years ago, a secret guilt David had buried deep. You couldn't save him either, it sneered, driving a wedge into the man's heart. Susan, bless her, clung to her rosary like a lifeline, reciting the mysteries late into the night, her voice trembling but resolute. She lost weight, her blonde hair thinning from stress, circles under her eyes like bruises. She'd call Father O'Malley at all hours, describing how Timmy would self-harm gnawing at his arms until blood welled up, or vomiting a gritty, ash-like substance the tests at the hospital showed was inorganic, like residue from a bonfire. Dr. Bennett ran more scans, MRIs, blood work at Street Charles, but everything came back normal. This isn't medical, she confided to Susan one afternoon in her office, the snow swirling outside the window. You need spiritual help. And spiritual help came, though not without hurdles. Father O'Malley, with his Irish lilt and calloused hands from years of manual labor in the missions, secured approval from Bishop George N. Isink, up in Portland. The Archdiocese was cautious. Exorcisms aren't granted lightly. They require evidence, witnesses, and a ruling out of natural causes. By early January, as temperatures dipped below freezing and the family huddled around their wood stove for warmth, the first rites began in the living room. O'Malley arrived with holy water from the Jordan River, a relic crucifix blessed by the Pope, and a team, a deacon from the parish, and a psychiatrist vetted by the church to observe. The sessions were grueling, lasting hours. O'Malley would command in Latin, exorcizo te immundissime spiritus, invoking the power of Christ to cast out the unclean spirit. Belial fought back viciously, furniture would shift, books flying off shelves like projectiles, aiming for the priest's head. Once, a Bible burst into flames on the coffee table, pages curling black before David stomped it out with his boot. Invisible claws raked across O'Malley's arms, leaving welts that bled through his cassock. Timmy's body contorted impossibly, limbs bending backward, and he'd speak in tongues, Aramaic phrases cursing the Trinity, knowledge no child could have. Jake and Emily, those brave siblings, pitched in where they could. Jake, at 17, skipped his after-school job at the local bait shop to stand vigil, reading from Psalms to drown out the demon's taunts. He'd challenge it directly sometimes, his voice cracking with adolescent fury. You're nothing but a liar, get out of my brother. Emily, with her camera, documented the chaos discreetly, photos showing orbs of light or shadows that moved on their own, evidence she'd later share with the church investigators. But the strain showed Jake started having nightmares, waking sweat-soaked. Emily withdrew, her journal entries turning from cheerful doodles to frantic pleas for normalcy. The community whispered, of course. At Street, Francis, after Sunday services where the choir sang, O come, Emmanuel, that Advent season, parishioners offered prayers but kept distance, fearing contagion. Rumors spread like wildfire through the ski lodges and coffee shops. The Harpers saved a man possessed, and now it's in their boy. David, battling his own demons with whiskey hidden in the garage, worked less, his logging routes handed off to buddies. He'd drive aimlessly along Century Drive, past the accident site, now marked by a faded memorial cross, questioning why God allowed this. Fires became a hallmark of the possession, tying back to that burning truck. The gas range in the kitchen would ignite spontaneously, flames leaping high enough to singe the cabinets. Once, during a rite, the curtains in the dining room smoldered, filling the house with smoke that triggered the alarms. Susan got burned, grabbing a pot, blisters forming on her palm in the shape of a cross, ironic, almost as if the demon mocked their faith. They installed fire extinguishers in every room, but it wasn't enough. The entity seemed to feed on their fear, growing stronger with each failed attempt to expel it. By February, as blizzards isolated, Bend further schools closing, roads impassable, the family was fracturing, Susan's health plummeted. She fainted one day at work, her boss sending her home with concerns about anemia from poor sleep. David hit rock bottom, passing out drunk one night while Timmy raged upstairs, forcing Jake to step up as the man of the house. The kids missed school, social services knocking on the door after anonymous tips. Father O'Malley pushed for escalation, contacting Father James Riley from Seattle, a seasoned exorcist who'd handled cases in Europe and Asia. Riley arrived by train flights, grounded by weather, a man in his 50s with a steady gaze and a voice like calm waters, carrying a worn Bible annotated from decades of battles. Together, they intensified the rites, moving sessions to the church basement for safety, away from the home's tainted aura. Witnesses multiplied. Dr. Bennett attended one, her scientific mind reeling as Timmy crawled upside down on the ceiling, defying gravity, hissing secrets about her own past doubts in faith. A social worker from Child Protective Services observed, notepad in hand, later testifying that what she saw couldn't be fake levitation. Temperature drops to near freezing in seconds, voices overlapping in languages she didn't recognize. Belial's tactics shifted, becoming more psychological. It targeted the family's unity, whispering to Susan about David's drinking, to David about Susan's waning strength, pitting siblings against each other with fabricated jealousies. Your brother resents you, it'd tell Emily through Timmy's lips. But they held firm, drawing on Scripture, Romans 8:38-39, that nothing can separate us from the love of God. Prayer chains formed a church, parishioners fasting in solidarity. As spring thaw began in March, snow melting into rivulets that swelled the Deschutes River, the battle entered its fiercest phase. Riley led now, his experience shining through in methodical commands, blending psychology with spirituality. Holy water would boil in the vial, bubbling over like acid, crucifixes heated up, burning hands that held them. Unseen pushes hurled participants. O'Malley sprained an ankle, falling backward. Fires escalated. A pew in the church singed during an off-hour session, forcing evacuation. The courts got involved when social services petitioned for Timmy's removal, citing safety. A judge in Deschutes County, after sealed hearings with expert testimony, allowed temporary placement with Susan's mother in nearby Redmond, about 15 miles east, but permitted continued rites under supervision. The family adapted David sobered, attending AA meetings at the church. Susan found solace in choir rehearsals, her voice lifting hymns like "Be Not Afraid" to counter the darkness. Through it all, my friends, what strikes me is their resilience. In my own ministry, serving as exorcist for the Archdiocese of Indianapolis since 2005, I've seen how evil preys on weakness, but faith turns the tide. The Harpers embodied that kneeling together, forgiving each other's lapses, clinging to the Eucharist as their strength. By late spring, buds blooming on the aspens and lakes thawing, the entity weakened. Sessions numbered over a dozen, each chipping away. In one, at Street, Francis proper, Belial shrieked prophecies of doom, but Riley pressed on, invoking saints like Michael the Archangel. Finally, in June, amid a storm that rattled the stained glass windows, the demon yielded, howling its defeat. "I'll stalk other rescuers." A gust swept through, carrying acrid smoke, then silence. Peace descended like dawn after night. The Harpers relocated to Salem, an hour's drive north, starting fresh. Timmy healed, growing into a tour guide on those same mountains. Jake wed, starting a family. Emily pursued nursing, inspired by the care she'd seen. David opened a mechanic shop, sober and steadfast. Susan sang on, her choir a beacon. A decade later, by 2005, David shared the story with grandchildren around campfires, emphasizing that shadows may follow acts of kindness, but Christ's light scatters them, fortified by family bonds. It's a reminder, folks. Evil is real, but so is redemption. As the snows of winter gave way to the tentative greens of spring in 1996, my friends, the Harper family's struggle against this infernal presence reached its most intense crescendo, a period marked by unrelenting spiritual warfare that pushed everyone involved to the brink of endurance. The mountains around Bend began to thaw, with meltwater rushing down the slopes into the Deschutes River, swelling it to near flood levels after a heavy season's accumulation, some areas seeing over 100 inches of snowfall. Wildflowers poked through the soil along Century Drive, crocuses and lupines, adding splashes of purple and yellow. But inside the Harpers' home, the atmosphere remained frozen in dread, a stark contrast to the renewing world outside. By March, with daylight stretching longer and temperatures climbing into the 40s during the day, Father O'Malley and Father Riley had formalized a rigorous schedule of exorcism rites, conducting them 3 times a week in the sanctuary of St. Francis de Sales Church to minimize risks to the household. The church itself, a modest brick building with arch windows overlooking the old mill district, became their battleground, its altar adorned with fresh candles, the air thick with incense from frankincense sourced from a monastery in Idaho. Riley, with his composed demeanor honed from cases in Rome and Manila, took the lead, his kit including a stole embroidered with protective symbols and a vial of oil blessed during the Chrism Mass. Each session unfolded like a meticulously planned operation, starting at dawn when the first light filtered through the stained glass, casting rainbow patterns on the pews. Timmy would be brought in, restrained gently with soft straps on a padded mat to prevent injury, court-approved measures after the judge's ruling, ensuring medical oversight. Dr. Bennett attended regularly now, her stethoscope around her neck, monitoring vital signs as the boy's heart rate spiked erratically. A county social worker, a no-nonsense woman named Margaret Hayes, sat in the back, her reports later sealing the case's confidentiality under Oregon law. The demon's resistance manifested in waves of escalating fury, each rite peeling back layers of its hold, but provoking backlash that left physical and emotional scars. In one early April session, as Riley intoned the litany of the saints calling upon Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael for aid, Timmy's body lifted off the mat, hovering 2 feet in the air, rotating slowly like a leaf in the wind. The air grew oppressively hot, sweat beading on everyone's brows despite the cool morning, and the holy water in the aspergillum began to bubble and steam, hissing as if poured on coals. When sprinkled, it left red welts on Timmy's skin, the entity screeching in a voice that modulated from basso profundo to a piercing falsetto, "You mortals meddle in fires you cannot quench." Susan, positioned nearby with her rosary, would sing softly to counter the noise old Irish hymns like "Hail, Queen of Heaven," her voice quavering but gaining strength as others joined in. David, having committed to sobriety through daily meetings at the parish hall where he'd share coffee with other recovering folks from the logging community, knelt steadfastly, his calloused hands clasped, whispering the Our Father repeatedly. He'd glance at Timmy with a mix of paternal love and steely resolve, remembering how the boy once helped him tune up the truck in the driveway, grease-smudged smiles all around. Jake and Emily, excused from school with home study packets, contributed in their ways. Jake, growing broader-shouldered from chopping firewood to keep the home heated, would read aloud from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, where Jesus casts out a spirit from a boy, emphasizing, "This kind can come out only by prayer." Emily, her journal now a chronicle of hope amid horror, sketched quick drawings during breaks, images of angels she imagined guarding them, which she'd pinned to the church bulletin board for encouragement. But the toll was evident. Jake developed a tic, twitching his shoulder when stressed. Emily suffered migraines, pounding headaches that blurred her vision after particularly violent episodes. Belial's tactics evolved, becoming more insidious, targeting vulnerabilities with precision. During a mid-April rite, Coinciding with Easter preparations, palms woven for Palm Sunday, the entity revealed intimate secrets to fracture trust. To Father O'Malley, it whispered of a youthful indiscretion from his seminary days in Dublin, a moment of doubt that led to a brief lapse in vows, something confessed and absolved decades ago. The priest paled but pressed on, replying, "The blood of Christ washes all clean." To Riley, it mocked a failed exorcism from his past in the Philippines, detailing the victim's relapse, aiming to sow seeds of inadequacy. Even the observers weren't spared. Dr. Bennett heard echoes of her own marital struggles, a divorce finalized years prior, while Hayes was taunted with reminders of a case she'd lost, a child removed too late from harm. Physical phenomena intensified, tying into the fire motif that haunted the case. Candles on the altar would flare up suddenly, flames shooting 3 feet high, melting wax in rivulets that formed grotesque shapes on the floor. Once, the thurible chain snapped, sending the censer flying across the nave, clanging against a statue of St. Francis and igniting a small blaze in the carpet, quickly extinguished by David with a nearby fire blanket. Susan bore the brunt one evening when, assisting with a blessing, an unseen force ignited her sleeve, burning her forearm badly enough for a trip to the ER, where nurses bandaged it with salve, noting the wound's odd, cross-like pattern. The legal entanglements added another layer of strain. With Timmy temporarily at his grandmother's ranch-style home in Redmond, 15 miles east, surrounded by juniper trees and open fields, the family commuted for sessions, the drive along Highway 20, a tense ritual of silent prayers. The judge, a veteran of family court in Bend, required biweekly updates, balancing child welfare with religious freedom under the First Amendment. Social services pushed for psychiatric hospitalization, but testimonies from Riley and O'Malley, backed by video footage, grainy VHS tapes showing levitations and object movements, swayed opinions toward continuation. Community support waxed and waned. At St. Francis, a prayer vigil formed, parishioners rotating shifts to intercede, lighting vigil candles that burned steadily in the side chapel. But gossip festered in town, whispers at the Deschutes Brewery or the local Safeway about that possessed kid on Century Drive. David faced stares from fellow truckers at the lumber yard, some offering awkward pats on the back, others crossing the street. Susan found solace in her choir, rehearsing for Easter Mass, her alto blending with others in Alleluia choruses that lifted her spirits. As May bloomed, with rhododendrons flowering pink along the trails near Tumalo Lake, the rites numbered over 10, each chipping at Belial's grip. The entity weakened visibly, Timmy's convulsions less violent, the voice fading to whispers. In a pivotal session, Riley employed the rite of exorcism's major form, commanding in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The church shook slightly, perhaps, from a distant tremor in the Cascades, or something more supernatural, windows rattling as if in a gale. Belial countered with illusions, shadows dancing on walls, forming horned figures, a chill wind carrying the scent of ash. The family's unity proved the turning point. David confessed his struggles openly during a family prayer circle, tears streaming as he asked forgiveness for his lapses. Susan embraced him, her burns healing into scars that she called badges of battle. Jake and Emily shared letters they'd written to Timmy, affirmations of love read aloud, piercing the demon's isolation tactics. "We're in this together," Jake declared, his voice firm. By late May, with Memorial Day barbecues sending the air, neighbors grilling burgers, while the Harpers fasted, the entity faltered. In the 13th rite, Timmy's body slumped after a prolonged invocation, the air clearing of its oppressive weight. Whispers of defeat echoed, "You win this round," but shadows linger. Riley sealed it with anointing oil, tracing the cross on the boy's forehead. Yet the war wasn't over. 2 more sessions solidified the liberation, leading into June's warmth. The Harpers emerged battered but bonded, their faith forged in fire. In my reflections as an exorcist, appointed to handle such cases in Indiana, I see parallels. Evil thrives on division, but love in Christ's name unites and conquers. The final expulsion awaited, but this phase taught them endurance, a testament to Proverbs 24. 10, if you falter in a time of trouble, how small is your strength. As summer approached, with the sun setting late over the peaks, the climax built at St. Francis. in that ultimate confrontation. Amid thunder rumbling from a rare Oregon storm, Belial's roar filled the nave. I'll seek other saviors, mark my words. A vortex of wind and smoke swirled, then dissipated, leaving Timmy collapsed but free, his breathing steady for the first time in months. The aftermath brought healing. Relocating to Salem, 50 miles northwest, with its cherry orchards and state capitol dome, offered a fresh start. Timmy, regaining color in his cheeks, explored new woods, his energy returning like a dam bursting. He grew into guiding tours on Mount Hood, sharing nature's wonders without a trace of shadow. Jake, marrying his high school sweetheart in a simple church ceremony, started a family, his protective instincts channeling into fatherhood. Emily pursued nursing at Oregon State, her empathy deepened by witnessing suffering and recovery. David launched his garage in downtown Salem, tools gleaming under fluorescent lights, his sobriety a daily victory celebrated with AA chips. Susan continued her choir work, her voice soaring in new parishes, organizing community events that echoed their old life. By 2005, with the new millennium's changes, cell phones buzzing, internet connecting worlds, David, graying at the temples as a grandfather, gathered grandkids around backyard fires in Salem. He'd recount the tales sparingly, focusing on lessons. Kindness can invite trials, but God's grace turns them to triumphs. Family and faith, they're your armor. This story, my friends, underscores a truth I've witnessed in over 50 exorcisms. The demonic is real, opportunistic, latching onto vulnerabilities like that roadside mercy. But as 2 Corinthians 12:9 reminds, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. The Harpers lived that, emerging stronger, a beacon for any facing unseen battles. As the calendar flipped deeper into the spring of 1996, my friends, the spiritual siege on the Harper family intensified into a protracted campaign of endurance and revelation, where every rite became a skirmish in a larger war for the soul, revealing layers of demonic cunning that even seasoned clergy like myself have learned to respect through hard-won encounters. The weather in Bend turned milder, with April showers nourishing the high desert landscape, sagebrush greening along the banks of the Deschutes, and migratory birds returning to nest in the ponderosas, their calls a reminder of life's persistence amid chaos. Yet for the Harpers, relocated temporarily with Timmy at Grandma's in Redmond for safety, the days blurred into a rhythm of vigilance. Their old log home on Century Drive, standing empty like a silent sentinel, its windows dark against the budding backdrop. Father Riley, drawing from his global toolkit rituals refined in the humid chapels of Southeast Asia and the ancient basilicas of Italy, escalated the approach, incorporating diagnostic prayers to probe Belial's weaknesses. These weren't the dramatic Hollywood flourishes. They were methodical, rooted in the Roman ritual, updated by the Vatican, emphasizing discernment over spectacle. In a session mid-April, held in the church's sacristy to contain energies, Riley began with the imposition of hands, a gentle laying on as described in James 5:14, calling for elders to anoint the sick. Timmy, strapped securely but comfortably on a reclining chair borrowed from the parish hall, responded with a torrent of Aramaic invectives, words that linguists later confirmed as archaic curses against the divine order. The room's temperature plummeted 20 degrees in seconds, frost forming on the chalice despite the thermostat reading 70. Susan, her arm still bandaged from the earlier burn, now a puckered scar, she traced absent-mindedly during prayers, recounted in her diary how the entity shifted strategies, mimicking voices of loved ones to erode morale. Once, it spoke as her late mother, pleading, "Let me in, dear, it's cold out here," only to dissolve into mocking laughter when challenged. David, fortified by his AA sponsor, a fellow logger who'd battled his own addictions, responded by leading group recitations of the Serenity Prayer, his voice steady. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. It grounded them, countering the psychological barrage that aimed to isolate each member. Jake, navigating the awkward cusp of manhood, took on reconnaissance duties, researching demonology in the Bend Public Library, poring over dusty tomes on biblical spirits, cross-referencing Deuteronomy 17, 7 where Belial is linked to sons of rebellion. He'd share findings with the priests over coffee at the church kitchen, his notes scribbled on legal pads. It thrives on lawlessness. Maybe that's why it hates structure. Emily, meanwhile, volunteered at the hospital's pediatric ward during off days, drawing strength from helping other kids, her empathy a shield against the home front's horrors. She'd bring back stories of small victories, a child recovering from surgery, to remind the family that healing was possible. The demon's physical retorts grew inventive, exploiting the environment. During a May rite coinciding with the town's annual pole pedal paddle race athletes skiing, biking, and paddling 20 miles through the Cascades, the entity manipulated elements beyond fire. Water from the baptismal font surged upward in a geyser, drenching participants and shorting out the audio recorder used for documentation. Riley, unfazed, switched to a manual notebook, his handwriting precise as he noted the entity's claims. I've walked these lands since the volcanoes birthed them, tying into local lore of ancient spirits among the lava fields. Invisible pressures, compressed chests, making breathing labored, as if the air thickened to molasses. Doctor, Bennett measured oxygen levels, dropping inexplicably, her equipment beeping alarms. Legal oversight added procedural layers, with haze from social services requiring detailed logs, session durations averaging 4 hours, vital signs charted every 15 minutes. The judge extended the temporary custody order, but commended the family's cohesion in a private hearing, noting how David's testimony about his sobriety journey swayed opinions. I faced my own darkness. This is just another form. Community ripples extended anonymous donations, funded counseling for the siblings, and a prayer quilt stitched by church ladies with verses from Psalms 91 wrapped Timmy during transports in the family truck, its 15-mile jaunts becoming pilgrimages of hope. Belial's revelations deepened the theological stakes, quoting twisted scriptures to debate the priests. In one heated exchange, it mangled 2 Corinthians 11:14, claiming, even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Why not a child savior? O'Malley countered with Ephesians 4:27, do not give the devil a foothold, his Irish accent thickening with passion. These dialogues, far from theatrical, illuminated the entity's intellect, a fallen angel's remnant wisdom, perverting truth. Riley shared from his experiences. In Manila, one such spirit debated Aquinas for hours. Knowledge doesn't equal holiness. Family dynamics evolved under pressure. Susan and David rekindled intimacy through shared devotions, walking hand in hand along Redmond's dry creek beds, discussing Proverbs 31's virtuous woman as inspiration. Jake confided adolescent fears to his father during garage tinkering sessions, fixing up an old Chevy pickup, bonding over wrenches and wisdom. Emily's migraines eased with herbal teas from a local apothecary, her journal entries shifting to gratitude lists, thankful for sunrise over the buttes, for brother's laugh returning. As June approached, with solstice lengthening days to 16 hours of light, the rites hit a plateau of attrition. The 14th session, under a waxing moon visible through the church skylight, saw Belial falter mid-taunt, its voice cracking like static on an AM radio. Holy relics, a fragment of the True Cross loaned from Portland, amplified commands, causing Timmy's form to shudder violently, expelling a foul vapor that dissipated like mist. Witnesses, now including a diocesan investigator from Salem, documented anomalies. Compasses spinning wildly, electromagnetic readings off the charts from a borrowed meter. The Harper's faith, tempered like steel, became the decisive weapon. In group confessions, they laid bare resentments, David's guilt over extended work hours pre-accident, Susan's unspoken frustrations with family burdens, forgiving under the priest's guidance, invoking Matthew 18:15's reconciliation. This vulnerability starved the demon, which fed on hidden sins. By mid-June, with temperatures hitting 80 degrees and tourists flocking to the lakes for boating, Sparks Lake, now a hub of kayaks and picnics, the 15th rite loomed as potential finale. Storm clouds gathered over the Three Sisters peaks, 20 miles west, thunder rumbling like divine artillery. In street, Francis's main nave surrounded by flickering votives, Riley invoked the full exorcism prayer, his voice resonant, "I cast you out, unclean spirit, along with all your works and pomps." Belial's final stand was desperate, illusions of flames dancing on walls, whispers amplifying to roars that shook the rafters. It prophesied vaguely, shadows will claim the rescuers of tomorrow. But as the family united in the creed, voices harmonizing, the entity weakened, Timmy's body convulsing one last time before stilling. A whirlwind stirred papers, carrying acrid smoke out an open window, then calm enveloped the space, the storm outside breaking into cleansing rain. In the hush, Timmy stirred, his eyes clear, asking weakly for water, his own voice, boyish and innocent. Dr. Bennett checked him, pulse normal, no anomalies. Hayes nodded approval, her report sealing the case's resolution. This victory, my friends, wasn't abrupt, but the culmination of months where human frailty met divine strength. In my Indianapolis ministry, handling cases from rural farms to urban apartments, I've seen similar arcs. Persistence in prayer erodes even ancient evils. As 1 John 4 affirms, "The one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world." With liberation secured, the Harpers turned to reconstruction. Packing the log home took weeks, sorting mementos amid sage smudgings by a Native American elder from the Warm Springs Reservation, 30 miles north, blending traditions respectfully. The move to Salem along Interstate 5 felt like Exodus. Their truck loaded with boxes, Timmy napping peacefully in the back. In Salem's milder Willamette Valley, amid vineyards yielding Pinot Noirs and hop fields for craft beers, they settled into a rancher on a quiet cul-de-sac. Timmy resumed school, his curiosity channeling into science fair's projects on volcanic geology, echoing the land's fire theme without fear. Therapy sessions with a church-recommended counselor helped process traumas, using art to externalize memories. Jake, graduating high school with honors, apprenticed at a Bend outfitter before relocating his wedding in 2000 to a local girl, a simple affair at a Valley Chapel with toasts to resilience. Emily excelled in nursing prerequisites at community college, her bedside manner intuitive, volunteering at Salem Hospital's burn unit, ironically, turning pain to purpose. David's garage, Harper Auto Repair, opened on Commercial Street, specializing in heavy-duty trucks, his expertise drawing loggers from afar. Sobriety milestones marked with family barbecues, grilling salmon from the Columbia River, 80 miles north. Susan rejoined a choir at St. Joseph's Parish, her solos in Christmas pageants drawing crowds, her warmth rebuilding social ties. By 2005, with iPods, buzzing tunes, and hybrid cars on roads, David hosted grandkids at Silver Falls State Park, 10 miles east hiking trails under 14 waterfalls, totaling over 200 feet drops. Around campfires, he'd weave the tales selectively. We faced a storm once, but love lit the way home. This narrative, drawn from accounts I've studied, illustrates evil's opportunism but ultimate defeat. As an exorcist since my appointment, witnessing liberations across demographics, I affirm faith isn't absence of fear, but action despite it. The Harpers exemplify that their legacy, a quiet testament in Oregon's annals. As the rites culminated in that stormy June of 1996, my friends, the Harper family's deliverance unfolded not as a sudden miracle, but as a gradual dawning of light piercing through the accumulated gloom, a process that mirrored the slow melt of Cascade snowpacks, feeding into crystal clear streams below, with the final expulsion echoing in the nave of street. Francis, that whirlwind carrying away the last vestiges of Belial's malice, the immediate aftermath brought a profound stillness to Bend, where summer tourists now filled the highways with RVs and boats, oblivious to the spiritual drama that had played out in their midst. Timmy, emerging from the haze like a hiker breaking through fog on a mountain trail, blinked in confusion at first, his small frame exhausted but unburdened, asking for simple comforts: a glass of milk from the church kitchen, his favorite blanket from Grandma's house in Redmond. The priests, O'Malley, with his weary smile, and Riley packing his relics for the train back to Seattle, conducted follow-up blessings, sprinkling holy water throughout the empty log home on Century Drive, anointing doorways with chrism oil to seal against any lingering influences. Dr. Bennett ran post-event checkups at Street. Charles, noting Timmy's vitals stabilizing, blood pressure at a healthy 100/60, no more anomalous ash in his system, just a boy needing rest and nutrition after months of turmoil. Social worker Hayes closed the file with a nod of approval, her reports archived under seal, commending the integration of faith and welfare that Oregon's system allowed. Susan orchestrated the move to Salem with quiet efficiency, enlisting church volunteers to load boxes into a rented U-Haul 20 feet long, plenty for their pared-down belongings, as they donated much to the parish thrift shop, shedding material weights along with spiritual ones. The drive north along Highway 97, then west on 22, took about an hour and a half, passing through Sisters with its quaint western storefronts and into the fertile Willamette Valley, where fields of hazelnut orchards stretched under June skies averaging 75 degrees. Their new home, a single-story bungalow on a tree-lined street near Bush's Pasture Park, 4 acres of rose gardens and walking paths, offered a fresh palette, neutral walls ready for family photos, a backyard with space for a swing set Timmy eyed eagerly. Reintegration proved a mosaic of small victories and lingering echoes. Timmy returned to school in the fall at a public elementary in Salem, his 4th grade class focusing on Oregon history, learning about Lewis and Clark's expedition along the Columbia, 80 miles north, which sparked his interest in exploration without triggering old fears. Counseling sessions, twice weekly with a therapist specializing in trauma, used play therapy, building models of safe havens with blocks, drawing maps of adventures where heroes triumphed over shadows. He gained weight, hitting 50 pounds by Christmas, his laughter ringing true again during family game nights with Monopoly. Salem edition highlighting local landmarks like the state capitol's Golden Pioneer statue. Jake, channeling his protective energy, took a gap year working at an outdoor gear store in nearby Albany, 20 miles south, outfitting hikers with boots rated for the Pacific Crest Trail that snakes through the Cascades. He saved for community college, enrolling in business courses while courting his future wife, a barista at a drive-through espresso stand their dates, involving picnics at Silver Falls, where 10 waterfalls cascade over basalt cliffs, totaling 200 feet in drops, mist cooling the air on warm days. Their wedding in 2000 at a modest venue overlooking the Willamette River featured vows emphasizing endurance, with Father O'Malley traveling down to officiate, his homily drawing from Hebrews 12:1, "Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." Emily dove into academics with renewed vigor, her high school years at Sprague High marked by volunteering at Salem Health's emergency room, shadowing nurses on 12-hour shifts, handling everything from flu cases to minor burns, ironic echoes that she transformed into expertise. By 2002, she matriculated at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland, 45 miles north, commuting via Amtrak's Cascades line for clinicals, her scrubs embroidered with the school's logo. Specializing in pediatric care, she authored a thesis on post-traumatic resilience in children, anonymizing her family story, but infusing it with insights on how community support, like the prayer chains back and bend, bolsters recovery. David's entrepreneurial spirit bloomed in Salem's bustling economy, his garage on Liberty Street Northeast drawing a steady clientele, state workers with sedans needing oil changes at 3,000 miles, farmers from the valley with pickups hauling hay bales. He implemented eco-friendly practices, recycling motor oil through local programs, and mentored apprentices from the local Votech school, sharing stories of mechanical puzzles solved under pressure, paralleling his own life's repairs. Sobriety became a cornerstone. His 10-year chip, earned in 2005, celebrated with a family trip to Crater Lake, 90 miles southeast, where the caldera's deep blue waters, over 1,900 feet deep, symbolize depths overcome. Susan found her voice, expanding beyond the choir loft, leading workshops at Street, Paul's Episcopal in Salem on spiritual wellness, blending Catholic traditions with ecumenical hymns like Amazing Grace. her sessions attracting diverse attendees from the city's growing Latino community. She gardened therapeutically, planting rhododendrons that bloomed vibrant in May, reminiscent of Ben's wildflowers but tamed in suburban beds, yielding bouquets for church altars. The story's ripple effects extended subtly into the broader church network. Father O'Malley, retiring in 2000, penned a memoir excerpt shared in diocesan newsletters, anonymized but highlighting discernment in possession cases, lessons Riley incorporated into training seminars for new exorcists across the Northwest. In my own practice, reviewing similar files from the Indianapolis Archdiocese, I've noted patterns: the transfer of evil through acts of mercy, as in the Harper's roadside heroism, echoing cases where Good Samaritans unwittingly invite attachments, per the warnings in 1 Peter 5:8, your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. By 2005, with the world buzzing about Hurricane Katrina's devastation down south, Oregonians sending aid via Red Cross drives, the Harpers had woven their ordeal into a tapestry of normalcy. David, now 54 with salt and pepper hair, hosted barbecues in their expanded backyard, grilling venison from hunts in the Coast Range, 30 miles west, while grandkids Jake's 2 toddlers chased fireflies under twilight skies. He'd pull them aside for quiet talks by the fire pit, flames controlled and warming, sharing parables. Life's highways have wrecks, but stopping to help. That's our calling. Just arm yourself with prayer like a seatbelt for the soul. Timmy, at 19, apprenticed as a wilderness guide with a firm leading trips into the Mount Jefferson wilderness, 20 miles east of Salem, teaching clients to read topo maps with contour lines at 40-foot intervals, spotting elk herds in meadows. His scars, faint on his arms, became conversation starters on trails, reminders that light winds, he'd say, echoing family lore without details. Emily, married by then to a fellow nurse, balance shifts with motherhood. Her home in Kaiser, 10 miles north, filled with medical texts and baby toys. Her approach to patients informed by empathy. Healing starts with listening, a lesson from those long rites. The legacy, my friends, lies in quiet transformations. A family once fractured, now unbreakable. Their faith not fanatical but foundational, like the basalt under Oregon's volcanoes. In my exorcisms, over 60 by now, from suburban haunts to rural possessions, I've drawn inspiration from such tales, reminding petitioners that victory comes through community, as in Acts 2:42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship. As years passed, the Harpers occasionally revisited Ben for reunions at Tumalo Lake, now a state park with improved campsites, picnicking under the same pines, toasting marshmallows without a whiff of unnatural smoke. David would gaze at the water, depth averaging 20 feet, and reflect, we dove deep, but surfaced stronger. It's a universal truth. Darkness tests, but grace sustains, turning survivors into beacons for others navigating similar shadows.